My name's Todd Von Dijk, and I'm with the New Jersey Food Processors Association, and I'm thrilled that we're able to continue our fireside chat series today and with the legendary Howard Dorman from MAZARS USA.
Legendary.
Anyone who's been in the business, in the food processing industry for any amount of time understands, knows who Howard is, even if they haven't met him. His 40 plus years of experience has been turned to by countless folks, companies, people, entrepreneurs, you name it. He's smiling right now if you can't see that part of the feed. So clearly the write-up that his loved one sent me to read is working. So I'm just thrilled to have you, Howard. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you very much. Great intro. I think you've said enough, and we could end the call right here.
And both of our parents would be pleased. You know, I think what we wanted to talk about today was a little bit of perspective on this changing environment that we find ourselves in COVID-19. As we record this here in the early parts of May, you know, we've gone through over 50 days now of so many shelter-in-place orders, challenges to get businesses back up, manufacturing, working through financials with PPP and all these other things. And we're going to try and touch base on those today. But before we get there, Howard, you know, for the one person in America who doesn't know about your background or MAZARS or whatnot, maybe just a couple of minutes of introduction, I think we'd all appreciate.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Todd, I was raised in New Jersey. I have, as you mentioned, over 40 years of experience in the New Jersey market. I would say up until about 15 years ago, it was a kind of a general background of the types of industries that I got involved with. And then around 15 years ago, I started concentrating more on food and beverage companies. And when we joined MAZARS in 2007, I joined the food and beverage group that we had, and we go to market by industry. And it's been a lot of fun. It's a great sector to be in. There's so much innovation, so much passion. We work in our group with companies that range up and down the supply chain, from agriculture and ingredient processors and manufacturers and importers, all the way through manufacturing, distribution, to retail, restaurants, franchises. So we see the whole gambit, without a doubt. And we see companies from inception to very large global type companies. So a little history about MAZARS. Here in the US, we're about 900 professionals. Our food and beverage team here is around 20 people. That includes the backgrounds of audit, tax, and consulting. And that consulting includes supply chain, organizational resilience, IT security, and cybersecurity. And we bring all these people together to concentrate on the food and beverage sector, which is a lot of fun. We probably represent here in the US about 250 food and beverage entities. Globally, MAZARS is in 90 countries, about 24,000 people strong, with a very strong presence in food and beverage. And we do a lot of cross-border work, which is a lot of fun. A lot of companies that have entities here in the US and home bases overseas. So hopefully that gives the listening public a good idea of who we are at MAZARS.
And folks, this is the reality of video production in today's world, and we're authentic in every way, shape, and form here at the NJFPA.
Yeah, sorry for that little pause, but I have somebody outside mowing my lawn right now, so there's nothing I could do about that, okay? So
it's all good. So Howard, you know, if my walking journal is right, we've been in shelter in place for about 50 days, 52 days or so right now. I'm wondering what stood out to you so far? What surprised you? What's encouraged you? What are the things you're thinking about as you think about the industry over the last bit?
Well, you know, the industry in certain areas got hit really, really hard. I don't have to tell you how many restaurants, catering, food service, party rental companies, anybody that's touching any type of food has been devastated on that side. There's no doubt about it. We have clients that made the hard decision back in early March just to close their doors. The PPP wasn't going to work. Bank funding wasn't going to work. We're just going to close our doors and we're going to hold tight until we can come out of this. I'm sure a lot of people out there have had weddings or plans or events like the food processors. How many events that were planned that had to be canceled? And remember, who's supporting a lot of those events are our food and beverage community.
Yeah.
We're seeing people rise to the occasion. Seeing so many people who have always chose to be upstanders and not bystanders. Whether that's people that at home are making sandwiches for the local hospitals or doing more work than they normally do at the local food banks. We're seeing that. We're seeing clients that are in the middle, that business is continuing. They've applied for PPP funding, or they do have availability. Maybe it's availability on their bank borrowings or personal monies. They do see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they're hanging in there. We're providing a lot of guidance for them. We've done a lot of work. I could spend hours on the work that we've done on the COVID, which changes day to day with the PPP. So many differences between the first round and the second round, not only in who's receiving the money and the average loan size, but I think people are finally understanding what the money's to be used for. We're seeing companies giving the money back. People that have applied for it, got it. Maybe it's the fine language in the rules with the SBA that they're getting nervous that maybe I don't need the money to get through, that I have other sources. So we're seeing a lot of that. But it does rear its ugly head. What's going to happen after the 8-week period?
Yeah.
What's going to happen in June and July?
So maybe to dive into the finance side just a little bit, you know, you mentioned PPP and we're in the second round here. You know, I think not to ask you if you saw the headline, but I saw a headline today that the SBA is making some very quick changes in how they're doing loan programs. We're hearing about systems being overwhelmed and whatnot. Wondered what thoughts, things, you know, folks out there, at least on May 7th, ought to have in their mind as they think about PPP financing, short-term loan, you know, the government support out there.
Well, you know, the first thing you have to do, I know a lot of people could be frustrated with their banks on why it took so long or why didn't I get in. But you have to look at the magnitude of this, of how many companies applied. And I'm talking about companies that needed to apply. Let's forget about those companies that were in the news that might have been publicly funded and they gave the money back. But the companies that needed the funding, the millions of companies, but only a certain percentage got funded, right, Todd? So yeah. If you want to use a number, 16%, 15% of the applications got accepted, 85% didn't. So on the first round. And the banks weren't all ready how to process this. There were some banks, local community banks, that were actually funding their client needs off their own balance sheet, then waiting for the SBA to fund. They wanted to get out in front of this, get money to their clients. So they took money off their balance sheet to fund those small business loans and then waiting. So you had people, but the big box banks have to go through regulations and IT and everything else. Some banks were able to turn around and fund within a couple of days. Some banks took longer. And I think it's been a very frustrating process for a lot of company owners, because we all hear about Todd got it or this guy got it. Why didn't I get it? Well, hate to tell you, but 80% of the people didn't get it, but they got it right in theory the second time. When you look at the average size loan of the first round was a little over 200,000, where I think statistics were, what's today, Thursday? Maybe through Tuesday, the average size was running around 90, 95,000 still.
Sure.
It hasn't been closed out. They've been vetting out this process. They have been taking a much sharper look at the applications and who's getting it. So, but you read now, restaurant owners are saying, hey, this PPP is not going to help me. So there's another avenue that we have to consider. But, you know, Todd and I, we live in New Jersey, as most of maybe our listeners do. New Jersey, New York, Eastern Pennsylvania, Connecticut, it's a war zone out here. And we're looking at this, you know, getting out of the house and going back into the public. It's not going to be happening as quickly as it is in other parts of the country. And that has a direct impact on these people who might have gotten PPP money and are starting to figure out, okay, who am I going to bring back? But is it going to really be enough? Because this is going to be over in June. If I got my funding today, I got 8 weeks, first week of June.
Yep.
I don't see me opening up any more than I am now. So
yeah, you need the money to use the money. Otherwise, you have to pay back the money.
So what happened? Right. So if I don't bring the people back, so theoretically, if I can't bring the people back because there's no end in sight, then I owe the money to the SBA. So if I squirrel it away, I can give it back to them. Or you know what? It's a 1% loan for 2 years, and I'm going to use it to keep my lights on until things turn around.
Sure.
Now, I don't want the SBA to come back on me on that, but that's a sharp sense of reality out there.
Sure.
Because a lot of time has transpired from when people put their applications in the beginning of April till now, and they might be getting money on the second funding, and they had to let people go, and now they don't have to bring them back. So
sure. Are there other places, other things that companies ought to keep an eye out on? You know, where would you tell folks to have their antennas out towards as it relates to funding issues, funding, you know, this whole world of staying afloat from the monetary perspective?
If you have the borrowing capacity and if you're an A-rated credit company, maybe. I'll be honest, because so there's the Main Street funding program that's going to be starting to come out. Banks are talking about it. This is a straight up loan. There's no forgiveness. This is a straight up loan. It's going to have particular features about it, maybe a payback of a long-term payback, a little bit higher interest rate on it. But there's one different caveat in this, is that the banks have to underwrite a certain piece of it. And what I mean by that is under the SBA program, the SBA guaranteed 100%. So even though the money came through the bank, if you foreclose on it, the bank will be made whole by the SBA. That's not true with the Main Street lending. The banks have to retain a vested interest in the loan. So on their balance sheet, if they lend out $10 million, they might be on the hook for 5 or 10%.
Sure. Well, on this flip side, at least from my perspective, you can have all the funding in the world, but if your supply chain doesn't have what you need, that money is not doing what it needs to do, for lack of a better phrase. So curious your take and what y'all are seeing as it relates to the supply chain.
Well, you know, it's twofold. You know, if you don't have the consumer confidence coupled with the supply chain issue. So we view the supply chain issue really as a work safety issue, no matter where you're at. You know, we're seeing what's happening, and, you know, what's really being highlighted is what's happening in the meat and chicken and the pork areas, the protein. There are other factories that have been deemed essential that have shut down, some in the seafood. So, I mean, just don't think it's all in the meat and the chicken. If you talk to your store owners, the supermarkets, they can't keep this stuff on the shelves long enough. This will level itself out. I think sometimes we add in a sense of panic when we shop, and we have to buy as much as we can. Maybe
Sure.
I'm guilty of certain things. I do it.
There's certainly been a rush on and a bum rush on a bunch of things on the retail front.
You know, I think on the retail front, which is really relevant in this conversation, because a lot of our processors in New Jersey and around the country, one of their prime customers are retail, whether they're co-packing, they're doing private label for the stores, or they're branding products for other people or themselves. Center of the store has become relevant again. There's a lot of activity in it. And I think people aren't going after those brand. If I can't get the product I always get, A, I'm taking B and I'm taking it home with me. So things have changed. I think the way that food will be delivered in the store will change over time. But I'll leave that up to the retailers.
Sure.
But in the supply chain, workplace safety is really, really so important. You know, we've seen some things that clients are doing now with thermal thermometer, thermal temperature taking, knowing what people, how they are coming in. We do understand people have to work in order to put food on their table. And it's a fine balance. So I think the employers have a risk. I mean, listen, if they're not going to check the employees, or they're going to turn the other cheek, and there's the chance of somebody getting sick in a plant, you're going to end up having to face not the consequences, but consequences of a closure and a 14-day quarantine. Nobody wants that. And I think that's what's causing this backup in the supply chain. And what's really incredible when you look at it, we look at ourselves as such an advanced society. I don't want to get cynical here a little bit, maybe I do. But when you look at things are backing up onto the farm, and we don't know what to do with the chickens and the cows. They're using words like depopulate, or you see in agriculture, tons and tons of fruit and vegetables being wasted on farms because they can't move in. Come on, guys. We've got other things we can do with that, okay? We have 30 million people unemployed, and a lot of them don't know what to do with their next meals. So in some aspects, we seem to be so progressive in things, and some things we're just not prepared for this. And how are we going to change our attitudes going forward? How are we going to prepare better? At MAZARS, one of our consulting groups is organizational resilience, right? That word has become very, very popular. So what are we going to do to change our behavior in 3 months or 6 months when things are getting, there's a new normal? How are we going to manufacture differently? How are we going to stockpile key essential things? Maybe we'll never see this again in our lifetime, and I hope so for my children and my grandchildren.
Of course.
But we have to be prepared, and we just weren't.
So thinking 3, 6, 9, do you think that there's changes coming forward? Do you think, if you had a crystal ball, to be authentic for a second, we're going to pause, guys. I know that. Head out, please. To be authentic, those were my children back from a COVID birthday party caravan and coming in. So, this is just life in today's days, and the beauty is we all just work with each other. In terms of that, I'm just thinking out, what do you think's on the horizon for the industry? Do you think there's some good stories that will come out of it? Is there innovation that you see the potential for? Would love your unofficial, won't quote you, even though you're on video to our entire organization, crystal ball of how do you see this kind of working itself out to the degree we can, any of us can?
The innovation will never change. There's always going to be innovation and passion. You know, we have the opportunity in food and beverage in our group, and I see a lot of emerging brands and companies that I was talking to in the latter part of 2019 that were ready to roll their product out. And, you know, they've gone through fundraising, they've got the money. So maybe their contracts with some of the retailers didn't quite hit now. They're going to hit. They're going to hit in the third quarter, the fourth quarter. So, you know, unless this has knocked you out of business and knocked you for a loop, the innovation will still be around. We're always looking for it. Look at the innovation of online buying and delivery to home. There's such great stories that came out of companies that should have never been in a home delivery business, who's taken their product, partnered with other companies to end up, instead of me going in and selling, you know, I make Tic Tacs, so I'm going to sell Tic Tacs, but you know what? I'm going to hook up with this guy and the produce guy and the meat guy, and now I'm selling to 1,000 homes a month. I'm delivering with my trucks to your home. So people have been so innovative, and I think that's going to be here to stay for a while, Todd. You know, we maybe not all that online, but I think you're going to see some stores changing the way, you know, they all wanted to go online, right? They were disappointed up until last year that their online sales were just creeping up a little bit. Well, those online sales blew out the doors, and I don't see that going away now. Again, remember, we're geographically restricted to the East Coast. I think we're going to walk before we run. And I think we're all, I could tell you, my wife and I, we watch the news, what's going on around the rest of the country and the world. And we're hoping it works. We really need it to work, guys, you know? So,
yes.
all we ask is don't be so arrogant. You know, I like to think of it being selfish. If me going out, I'm being selfish because I don't want to get somebody else sick. So that's really it. So, but we're in a different world here. Our governor, I listened to Governor Cuomo. They're getting ready to roll this out. And look, golf. You can go out and play golf as of last week, except you can't eat anything. So our food service companies are not going to be able to sell in to the golf courses.
The 19th hole is not the 19th hole. Yeah.
So
I would guess, you know, knowing that you're a man who has had many travels in this industry, that the core hasn't changed. There may be a different set of circumstances, but how you go about things, I would think that you're about to tell me, if I give you the opportunity, that staying true to who you are, staying true to what your business are, and just applying some different environmental factors is probably priority number one. And if you agree with that, I would love you to do that so I can send this tape to my mom and make her think I know what I'm talking about. But I'd also be curious, if that's priority number one, what's priority 2 and 3?
You know what? Right now, it's priority 1 has got to be stay true, workplace safety to get us through, to get everybody that we need to instill that confidence. The food and beverage industry in the last 5 years has gone great strides in transparency, you know, with FSMA and the foreign supplier verification programs. I think we're feeling pretty good. Yeah, once in a while we get some salmonella coming through. You get some bad things. It's always going to happen. Let's be very honest.
Sure.
But I think we've made some great strides. The USDA has relaxed some of these rules now because they can't make physical site visits. I'm sure a lot of our members are experiencing that as well. It's going to be there's going to be some downsizing without a doubt, but I think as the economy comes back, I think it's going to come back. And I think it's going to come back a little bit quicker because we all believe that we had a good thing going up until now.
Mm-hmm.
The innovation, to me, how companies have pivoted, I really wonder how they'll stay on course with that. Um, Private equity money, there was a lot of money available. People were looking for investments. I think that will continue. Um, Valuations have been affected. That's going to change a little bit as we go forward. So it's a new normal. We're going to have to figure out what that is. Sorry to disappoint you, Todd. Your mom will be happy with what you said. We have to be optimistic. There's some great, inspiring stories out there every day, especially in food and beverage. I read today that Wakefern donated $1 million to food banks.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
in
And read about
nine
that.
in the states that they're doing business in. So you have some of these companies, they're doing just great things. And I think we just have to have a little patience. That's what it's going to come down to. Hopefully but people are suffering. It's I can't stem that right now. There's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to make anybody feel any better when it's day to day, or not knowing, where maybe both spouses have been laid off, collecting unemployment, and collecting unemployment, I understand, is a nightmare. So it'll all catch up to us without a doubt, on a positive note. But we as consumers, we drive the car. So once we're comfortable in what we're doing, going into a supermarket, buying the product, going out to a restaurant, that's really what it is. So give us hope out there. Give us reasons to have that confidence.
Sure. One last question. I'm curious. I'm sure MAZARSUSA.com is #1 on the list, but if you were to suggest to folks a couple of websites to keep their knowledge up or to keep abreast of things, where would Howard send them these days?
Did I mention the MAZARS website?
I let in with that to cover you.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Todd.
because we
So,
all kind of figured that was #1.
we tried to be a receptacle of a lot of information on there, whether it's information that we're generating internally. We have a lot of PPP information. And please understand a disclaimer, and I think, Todd, you alluded to it before. The SBA is still working their way through this too, so there's going to be some fine tuning to this as we go along. But I think your association websites, the information that you guys are putting out, you have other partner organizations like the New Jersey Food Council, and
Sure.
what they're doing with the retail, and they're right in front of it. They're putting out great information. It's probably easier to list the places where I don't want you to go to, okay? But align yourself with the right people. Don't be afraid to call that person, say, hey, I got a question for you. I know you guys are doing this. I think everybody's very approachable at this time, even though you can't walk into their office. But you can certainly locate people. I mean, if you have to go to, it's www.MAZARSUSA.com. And from there, you can track email. If you want to get my email address, be much better than me reciting it now. Be very happy to chat with you. But again, even when times before COVID, align yourself with the right people to help you. Your law firm nowadays, legal issues are big. Employment issues are big. And make sure you're aligned well when we come out of this. Look at your insurance. For you guys in the manufacturing world, I know business interruption is big, but it wasn't big enough when it came to this. So you're going to find products coming out now that will maybe align with your supply chain. With supply chain disruption, talk to your insurance agents about that. This is going to be all about mitigating risk. Maybe that wasn't high on the risk before. Cybersecurity, how many of you out there now have your offices working remotely off VPNs? How secure are the VPNs? So I think security now has to be a big issue. Again, Ask the questions. There's no question that's too small or too large.
For sure. Howard, grateful. Truly appreciate this chance to chat. Perhaps, you'd be up for coming back maybe again over the summer, and we'll see where we are. How's that sound?
I'd like to do a follow-up temperature check, and hopefully we're all out playing golf, Todd.
From your lips to everybody's ears, but put me on the tennis court. Thank you again, Howard.
Great.
Howard Dorman, MAZARS USA. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Todd, and be safe, everybody.